Today, with me on the Teach the Future podcast premiere is Zanne Horell from Cape Town, South Africa. Futurist, facilitator, educator, and mother of two boys of 10 and 12. Zanne is director of Foresight Fundamentals and co-founder of Teach the Future South Africa. Started her journey because all decisions are made with the future in mind. She loves creative mornings and Playmobil. Zanne, hi. Playmobil. You have to explain that because your Instagram account is full of Playmobil.
Afternoon, Willem. Yes. Although I love Playmobil, my Instagram account has been hijacked by my 10-year-old. He loves telling stories. His favorite way of telling stories is taking photographs of his Playmobil figures as they go through all sorts of adventures. And because he's 10, he's not allowed an Instagram account of his own. So he uses mine.
Aha! So you've been hijacked. But he loves Playmobil. And is there a relation between Playmobil and futures thinking, or is that just too far-fetched?
No, I don't think it's far-fetched. I think one of the ways that we explore the world is by either stories about things that happened in the past or stories that are of things that can still happen. And what my son does with his Playmobil, he tells all sorts of fancy stories and play scenarios in his own way of how things can go wrong. And then there's a riot in his city. He's got a whole city of men. And then there's different possible outcomes of how these riots are going to end. Police, or you can bring in a politician, or there can be a protest, and then some dialogue and some discussion. I think playing, in a way, is exploring the unknown.
Wow. Yeah, and it is a beautiful link with teaching the future. But before we go there, Zanne, a bit more about yourself. You live in Cape Town, South Africa. Could you tell me a bit more about where you live and how that is?
Yes, I am on the south, very, very far from the gradually getting colder north. We're in spring now, so I'm in the shadow of Table Mountain, one of the most iconic. And I've been here my whole life. I'm not mistaken, I was probably born about this from where I am right now. Luckily, I have had the privilege of travel, so it's not like I've only seen Cape Town. I've been all over the world, but my family is here, and the things that I love to do, including nature. We've got an amazing access to the sea and the mountain. It's all here. So happy to stay here.
Wow. And you started your career in accounting before you made the jump to future. So that's looking backward, Zane. That's looking backward. And now you're forward thinking. But how did you start in accounting and made the switch?
Well, I think the one misnomer wasn't a jump at all. It was a very long, gradual process. Because when I did start my career as an accountant many moons ago, and in fact, very shortly after my career, I was told that I'm completely unsuited for it. But luckily, so I have one of those non-linear careers that one reads about these days. It wasn't that fashionable 20 years ago. It seems to be a lot more these days. So I've done a lot of things except finance, looking back, but I've also been involved with publishing, IT. And I've always, after the traumatic experience of studying accounting, I thought I'd never study again.
Traumatic account.
So it was just not something on my horizon at all. And then I sat next to someone that was doing his master's in future studies at a. If I study again one day, I think I know what. And 3 months later, I was enrolled. I went to a talk was hosted by the University of Stellenbosch's Business School, where they explained what the course was about. I came home, and I have not looked back since then. It's been an amazing journey. When I did my postgraduate diploma on future studies, was really good. I was still working full time. My kids were slightly smaller then.
How long is that ago? Because when you made the switch, that was 20.
That was in 2017.
Yeah.
So 4 years ago. And then once I was hooked, and the thing is, there's a quote that I read many moons ago that says that once man's mind, and that was nothing was referring to men, has been, it can do something new, it can never return to its original size. And I think it was like that for me with future studies. Once I've discovered that there are so many different ways of looking, that there's ways of crafting the world that we are heading towards, I really couldn't go back to my day. My job at Media 24, which is time, and I enrolled for my master's degree full time. And in the time that I was doing my master's, which I've now completed, I started Foresight Fundamentals Teach the Future South Africa with Janine Nell, who is also part of the family.
And your thesis was about the futures of professional ethics as applied by CAS. Now that for me is very difficult, and usually writing a thesis is difficult, but the future of professional ethics. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
So a CA is a chartered accountant. And most chartered accountants in South Africa belong to a professional body called SAICA, the South African Institute for Chartered Accountants. So they're very similar, and they have the same level of recognition internationally as other chartered accountants in the UK and CPAs in the US. And as a profession, it puts itself out to be an ethical profession. It's got this custodian role in society. Make sure that the financial results and performance of organizations are reflected accurately and truly. Happened, and this really started, is the focus of a lot of accountants shifted, and instead almost a public service, the motive stronger. And I think there's very few people who are around that don't remember the Enron scandal we had in the early 2000s. And into the big accounting scandals that happened abroad, a number of severe accounting scandals in South Africa, chartered accountants did not fulfill their ethical obligations. Now that's that one can look at, and it was with in mind that I started my exploration in ethics of accountants. Is ethics what makes ethics such a relevant factor in today's society? As I journeyed through my thesis, that ethics is not something that's stagnant. I mean, the best example that one could probably out of history is that a few hundred years ago, it wasn't seen as unethical to own slaves. But yet we look back and we can without a doubt say that is unethical today. So the question then becomes, is ethics something that one can change and one can shape? And my conclusion was yes, because as long as we are open to learning more, become more ethically aware. And there's two dimensions to ethics that's so there's either the type of ethics where people are not do wrong things, and I think that's the kind of ethics that most professional organizations have been applying over the last couple of years. So they have beautiful codes of ethics, and everyone is trying really hard not to break the rules, the wrong things. But then there's another type of that says, well, instead of trying so hard not to do the wrong things, why shouldn't we rather focus on doing the right things? And it sounds like a very
Doing
subtle
good. Yeah.
doing
Doing
good.
good. Yeah.
And so this is in parallel. I mean, we all know that E a lot more important in the corporate world. BlackRock is very vocal about the they invest with and who they don't invest with, and expectations from the broader public of organizations are becoming higher. It's simply not good enough to just be concerned about the bottom. Organizations need to also concern themselves with the environment and with and I mean, for me, one of the good examples is if you look at directors' remuneration. So when I say chartered accountants, I mean, not all chartered accountants remain chartered accountants. Most of them in South Africa, in any case, move into the business world. So in my view, someone with that kind of professional qualification, ideally placed in society to make important and society-changing decisions. So when I say chartered accountants, yes.
Before you continue, Zan, so doing good or doing business for good as opposed to not doing the bad thing is of course something that is very and I think it just makes sense from a triple bottom line perspective, from a sustainable development goals perspective, and just to be thoughtful and mindful about it. Today is the 6th anniversary of the Sustainable Development Goals, so we're having this podcast on a beautiful day. My question is, okay, so you were studying and reflecting on the role of ethics in the chartered accountants, but how can you now make that into a relevant topic for as a futurist? Because now you're working with the educational sector, you're maybe engaging with the business sector, but from a totally different perspective, being involved with teaching the future.
Well, in a way, because I had to do a thesis on something specific, I did it on chartered accountants. But all the lessons that came out of it are equally applicable to anyone who has any form of influence in society and in the environment. And one of the things we teach us at Teach the Future is that you might be a school child, some form of influence in your immediate environment. So and the part of our learnings that we want to get out of kids is that realization that not all things that that not everything is happening, but they actually have a role to play and they can influence them. So all those same lessons that came out of what I was doing with chartered accountants are directly to everyone once they realize what their level of influence.
And that's a crucial point, I think, once they realize what their level of influence is. And I think if we reflect on the role of teachers as the custodians of grown-ups, of young people, and preparing them for life, there's of course a beautiful role to play for Teach the Future. As is in SDG 4, quality education. What do you see the role of Teach the Future being in South Africa, to be more specific, in supporting young children, in the age of 12 to 20, 25, to face the challenges they're facing? What are the challenges they're facing in South Africa?
I don't think we have enough time in this podcast to cover.
Sorry, yeah. Let's maybe let's try to make that a bit more compact. What do you see as your role? Yeah, so let's limit it to your circle of influence there, Zan. Yeah.
So I was being facetious. So we work a lot with children that come from what we call previously disadvantaged communities. And one of the things that the apartheid system directly tried to accomplish was to strip the black population of their belief in actually making a difference. And unfortunately, something like assistance doesn't just go away. When we started having our first democratic elections, that legacy is still latent, and we see that every day. So one of our big missions when we work with and play with and talk with, for them to realize that they are not only victims of their circumstance, that they have age and that they have the ability to make something.
Having agency, can you elaborate on that a bit? Because not everybody is English native. Having agency as an individual, what does that mean?
That's the ability to make your own decisions, to understand the consequences of those decisions, and then also to influence the people and elements around you. So one of the examples, and I know Janine might be, this is one of her favorite examples, but I'm going to steal it from there's a student that lives in our township, is what we call it's more of an informal settlement, so not lots of formal housing. And usually there's a student that lives just down the road from me, actually, because it's not. And just before lockdown last year, he started a little bicycle business because he realized people find it very hard to go and fetch their medicine or get their food, especially then when lockdown hit. So with the help of WhatsApp, which is a really very bit of technology, he started this service, and he gave employment to I don't know how many youngsters in his neighborhood. The older boys did all the deliveries. They went and fetched the cash from the they cycled to the pharmacy, got the medicine, and cycled back. And the younger boys fixed, and wow. That has really exploded. So what he's done, he hasn't only crafted a little business for himself. He's made a difference in his community. So that's the conversations we have when we talk to the young people in South Africa. Around, you look at the opportunities in your immediate environment, and then find solutions not only for yourself to make some money, because they do need some money to be able, but also to serve your community. And so for me, that's a perfect example of the kind of thinking that we are trying to instill.
So you're also trying to, from a Teach the Future perspective, helping them develop their entrepreneurial mindset, helping them to solve problems and think creative, and basically help them to make something of life, despite the fact that they might not come from a background that gives them a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely.
So how, for you, Zaan, what is success for you, or what is, when do you think Teach the Future South Africa is successful?
Well, the dream would be to reach all the Africa, but that's not realistic. Any child's life where we can come back from our say, oh, I suddenly realized that I have a role to play. For me, that is already a mark of success. We obviously want to reach as many children as possible, and we very hard to get some funding, because you can't. When you have them, you have to find a room to put them in, and you have to give them at least a sandwich if you want to talk to them for 4 hours. Talk to them. We actually our workshops are incredibly interactive, and more they talking, we just guiding the conversation. And the nice thing about working with children is there's their imagination. I think they're much better than adults are.
So what's the role technology plays in South Africa? Because the example that you gave, a kid using WhatsApp to build its business, what role would technology play for you to reach out to more kids?
That's a very difficult one, because at the moment we don't have Wi-Fi. Data is incredibly expensive. And even during lockdown, of the children in South Africa did not have access to online schooling. So our chances of onto the back of that is very limited. I mean, we can have children that have connectivity, but they're a small percentage of the population. Do you know that there are lots of initiatives around us that are working with the service providers, some services available at a zero rate? So it will be to build those kind of relationships so that when we do stuff, we can also partner with those people that have zero-based. We're quite far from that at the moment. I mean, a new online school that launched recently basically made all their material available for free to the whole of South Africa and Jordan. And they haven't even been able to get their stuff zero-rated yet. I'm sure they're working really hard at it, and they'll probably soon. But so yeah, that is long-term, short-term for us.
Let's play a little game, Zanne. So imagine that you are a reporter for the future, and we have to write this article on the world in 2030. So it's only 9 years from now. 2030. It's a milestone date for the SDGs. What would the title of your article be in 2030? Looking back.
Sure. This is now testing to see whether it's the optimist or the realist that came to this podcast today.
I think the optimist. You can dream now. It is the future, and you know that there's multiple ways. So please dream and inspire us with your imagination.
Well, I would like to say that South Africa's president, Siphiwe Ndlovu, has reached 2 of the S. We've managed to eradicate inequality, and we've managed to get all children with quality education. That would our female president would be announcing that. I would love to be able to write that story.
Wow. That's very, very, very inspirational, Zanne. And let's try and reach that level with Teach the Future in South Africa. Now, as a final question, if you were to ask one of your colleagues in the network of Teach the Future a question, who would that be in the network and from which country?
I will probably ask Rosa Algeria. What was it that she did that really made futures thinking stick in Brazil? Something remarkable. I think there's more about futures than before she started, and she knows how to carry a message, and I would like to know what that message was.
Wow. Well, I'm going to ask her that in the next Teach the Future podcast. Thank you so much for your inspiration. 2030 will bring the new South African president with SDG 4, and all the kids will have education. Please continue your work with Teach the Future, Zanne, and let's create a Playmobil story with that, with your children. And I'm looking forward to seeing that on Instagram. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Willem.